And this is going to be a fireside chat with Bogdan from Tenderly. We're going to talk about what's happening with the developer ecosystem here and how we can improve it. So please give him a big round of applause.
One, two, okay.
Welcome. I guess the first thing I want to start off with is just maybe have you walk us through how Tenderly got started.
Sure. So started on a hackathon. This is why we love ETH Global and all of the other hackathon events. So we were. Does anybody actually know where the name comes from? I know some of you from the crowd maybe know.
Actually, I don't think even I know this.
I thought Patrizio and Igor know it. No, okay. We started doing public procurement on chain at first. And in Serbian, that's also called.
Oh, the tenders.
Yeah, the tenders. Yeah. And it was the first blockchain hackathon in Serbia, and we made like this commit and reveal thing because corruption is a thing in Eastern Europe, a very profitable business. And then basically what we did there was trying to fix public procurement on chain. So it was a Hyperledger hackathon actually. So we started working on that, won that particular hackathon, and then tried to do that for like 4 months or something like that. And then I'm gonna have to curse, but we realized we don't give a fuck about public procurement, to be completely honest. But before that, we were working in a developer tooling company. And actually the first version of Tenderly was an open source tool to extract the stack trace from a Solidity smart contract when something fails. And then we were like, we're gonna change the name. And yeah, I'm Bogdan from Tenderly. So that's how that worked out.
Amazing. It's just easier to keep the same email.
Yeah.
We've learned that from experience. Walk us back to kind of 7 years ago, actually, maybe more, I think it was more than 7 years ago now. No, actually about 7 years ago.
7, 8, yeah.
What the world was like in terms of actually building EVM tooling and kind of how do you think that's changed so far?
So Tenderly started as an open source company. I mentioned that particular piece. And one of my favorite fireside chats, I mentioned this to you last night, was actually with Igor, where we were talking about, if you remember Igor, on the OP fireside, because BlockScout is fully open source and Tenderly is fully closed source. But yeah, so 7 years ago when we started as an open source company actually, but we were like, there's 7 companies in the world that came into existence from open source. It's 4 of us engineers who know nothing about business. What's the chance that we're going to be company number 8 that succeeds with this? And then we close source and try to innovate that way. To answer your question directly, the difference then there was we were trying to basically replicate everything that we used in Web 2, because I'm a distributed systems engineer by trade, and none of the stuff worked. So how debugging worked is if your Solidity contract failed, you would see it on Etherscan, on like Kovan, if you're on the bleeding edge, but probably some Rinkeby or some other network. And then, or Goerli, I think, actually came out.
Goerli or Rinkeby.
Yeah. But basically, it would go there, it would say invalid opcode and a smiley face that I fucking hated on Etherscan, and then you would have to delete lines of code until your smart contract worked. That was debugging. There was no console log, there was no any of these things. And this is why we did the first stack trace, and I honestly think Tenderly came into existence. There was this tweet that I saw, like, Greek philosophers had it easy. If nothing existed, I would have invented something as well. So we basically just started inventing stuff that we needed from Web 2. And there was a couple of other companies that were doing it. I mean, it was Remix, it was Alethea from Consensus for monitoring. OpenZeppelin did like OpenZeppelin is literally the standard library of our space, and we were trying to do the same thing, like tools that we were missing. We were trying to replicate that, and that's how we were doing product work.
So what are the products now, and kind of what is the new state of the ecosystem that's actually enabled by the Tenderly product suites?
I think the interesting. So I'm going to try not to make this a Tenderly shill. Who here heard about Tenderly or has used Tenderly? This warms my heart, actually. OK, cool. So there's the developer tooling suite, which most of you use, in the simulation suite. There's the infrastructure, like with RPCs. There's the testing infrastructure piece with virtual testnets, which a lot of people use. And there's a new security vertical, actually, as well. Now, when you sign a transaction on a Ledger device with a larger screen, we're one of the providers that does the security scan. So we like prevent hacks on the wallet level. And I actually do agree with Martin. He's not here for me to get Martin points. But I do agree with Martin that should be done, actually, on the sequencer level, mid to long term. But yeah, the difference in the system is right now that I think we're stuck in this very weird thing where Tenderly, for example, is the default developer tool, and I think it's very hard for anyone to make a developer tooling company now, because with all of the L2s and everything else, we're all writing to the same database. So in normal Web 2 terms, you create a developer tool, and there's like zero cost to running it. Here, it's like obscene amounts of cost because of full archival nodes.
And we're talking like literal money, not the time alone.
We're talking literal hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at least to run like the basics of developer tooling, not including humans and anything to actually build the thing. So it's very weird. I think that's why like Foundry and some other teams, what they're doing is amazing. But the whole DeFi money Lego thing and everything else, we're a highly collaborative space, and developer tooling in general, like even in Web 2, isn't collaborative in nature. Like nobody
is or is not?
Is not, I think.
Oh, that's interesting, because I would have, if there's anything we've seen, open source software outside of crypto is way more collaborative.
No. Okay. Sorry. I misspoke. No. So the development itself is highly collaborative. The usage of the tool is very single player.
Understood. I agree.
That's what I meant.
That's literally enterprise software. Yes.
Yes. And the thing here is, because we're all, the way I like to explain blockchain to my Web2 normies friends is, it's like a MySQL database where I can write directly into your table. It's highly a weird paradigm.
Sometimes that actually is.
Yes, and PLSQL 1. Only PLSQL now is Solidity. But basically, sorry for the dry humor. You're getting my full personality with cursing and everything else. But basically, it's extremely hard, and then our tools need to be highly collaborative by nature. So Foundry, for example, falls short the moment I need to show you a bug I have locally. I can pick two things. I can do a Foundry test, which most people use, and then share it with you. I can go with my laptop to you, and if I like in an office or do a Zoom call, or I can use something like a Tenderly virtual testnet to actually share it. But this isn't a Tenderly shell. Like, because we're all writing to the same database tables, our tools should behave as such. And I think that's why it's a much harder, even if we just look at it from a purely cost perspective, running a dev tooling company or any type of infrastructure, because it's also fucked up that in our space, developer tooling is actually infrastructure. We only see that now in Web 2 with GitHub Copilot and similar tools, because that objectively is infrastructure. It's running somewhere else. It's not on your computer. In Web 3, that was by default if you actually want to get any of these stuff.
So I mean, that's like a very, very interesting point. I actually do want to spend some time understanding at least the current state of developer tooling for Ethereum, but maybe a good way to sort of get to that would be understanding like what you think is wrong with the current developer ecosystem in Ethereum, whether it's from the point of view of we could do something better on the language, to we just don't have the basics that we really need with Web 2 as a comparison, to just things that you found people just keep complaining about, but turns out that they're still out of your control because it's a infrastructure or VM issue?
Loaded question.
Yeah.
And I could probably talk for...
But let's make some enemies today.
Yeah. No, it's not even that. I think even though we have technically, let's take Ethereum mainnet, we technically have two languages right now, so Solidity and Viper, that people, you can write contracts in UL, you can also etch code on a piece of rock. Like, I understand that you can do stuff like that, but the thing that's basically hard here is, like, Solidity isn't lacking generics, Solidity isn't lacking something for us to build apps at all. We're lacking a couple of things. Being content with the PMF being finance, I think that's one thing. And I think the second thing is then the tooling reflecting that fully, and not in all of the languages and everything else. I think what the Solidity team has been doing recently is amazing. I really trying to use every public possible situation to say that if debugging symbols are shipped in Solidity, we will lose a third of our revenue, but the ecosystem will thrive, and we're really actually trying very hard for that thing to happen. And then I honestly don't think TPS, that's my unpopular opinion, but I don't think TPS is what's preventing our space from succeeding.
Do you have an answer for what is?
No. I would make an L1 if I had an answer. So we're just here to support people who are trying to figure it out. So yeah, sorry.
Fair enough.
You're getting a truthful answer.
No, this is good. Okay, so we've all, I guess, I'm answering this as myself.
Actually, can I stop you for a second? I might actually have an answer. I think we just overpromised the timeline, not the value. I think that we just expected that we're all going to transact with stable coins, with BlackRock, and I'm going to send my mom like USDT instead of Serbian dinars or whatever. That is going to happen. We just have to see if my parents will be alive at that point, or if I'm going to be alive at that point. But if it's inevitably going to come, we're coming to that situation. The whole point with a generational leap like this is to either, similar to AI, for the value to be extremely apparent, or for the old system to realize that, or for us to fool the powers of old that this is the same thing and they can do the same fucked up stuff they have been doing so far, only here. And then it's like, aha, we actually fooled you. We can now see what you're doing, or we can actually prevent you from doing those things and stuff like that.
I like that take. Yeah, perhaps we can simplify this by putting crypto on a phone or something.
Yeah, as a DGen 1 folder. Yes.
So, I mean, I've kind of seen the beginnings of the developer ecosystem here and kind of where we are now, and you've kind of seen waves of all the dev tools that were popular and sort of what they got right and what they didn't get right, and we've kind of seen the whole from Truffle to Hardhat to Foundry now. I guess I'm curious about understanding from your perspective, did those things get better significantly to help actually improve, or do you think they were just kind of the changes because of this is just what's cool now and we'll just kind of take it and we've just settled on the next best alternative because others are just not fast enough in improving their code?
I think Hardhat was better than Truffle, but I think Truffle didn't have to die. I think Foundry is better than Hardhat, but Hardhat didn't have to die. I think Waffle is alive because people don't like Python, most people, and that's like people. And by the way, Waffle is amazing. I just hate Python, so this is why I wouldn't use. No, I'm not joking. It's like an amazing framework. But basically, to answer your question, I think we as a space are for the better, but I think we would have been in a much better situation if, I don't know, I had this Twitter interaction with Nick, actually, who was part of Truffle. The Truffle decoder is amazing. Like, we were actually scared as Tenderly that somebody might reuse it to rebuild some of the stuff that we built. That was completely ignored, like, by the most of the ecosystem. And then Hardhat did some similar stuff, and it was completely ignored by the Foundry. Or actually, I don't know the inner workings of these.
You didn't see,
things,
yeah.
But yeah, you don't see it, at least from the outside in. I think we constantly forget that somebody did some work as well and that we can learn from it. So that's, I think.
So I guess, how do you think about using those same tools and kind of building these, I would say, like additional collaboration layers for the Tenderly product versus kind of, seems like you're kind of creating a parallel version of these tools that are closed source. What's kind of a good way of thinking about actually being part of the open source community too?
I think it's hard. So there's a couple of things. We definitely want to, and this is like one of those don't hold me accountable to this statement type of thing where the marketing team yells at me afterwards, but we do actually want to open source some stuff. It's less of a technological problem, it's a purely business problem. So what the problem is there, that even the joke that they made is that I got approached by so many people in the conference here that they're like, oh, Tenderly is so successful. If we were as successful as people think in this room, from a monetary perspective, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would be sitting somewhere else. Now, what do I actually mean by this statement is that building public goods and developer tooling as public goods is expensive, especially in this space, if it makes sense. And the reason why we have to have stuff as closed source is because the system is still growing and we're not a proven business. We're looking like we have all of the trajectories and signals of a proven business, but are we a generational company? I don't know. I hope. I have to think as the founder.
I think you're obligated to say yes on this one.
Yes, marketing team, yes. But no, basically, the thing that's hard here is that, like, why is Foundry successful? It's because Paradigm has $2 billion. Georgios is an amazing leader, and the engineers working on that are amazing. But now you see Ithaca and you see Foundry development actually slowing down a bit. They are hiring, so they will continue, but by definition, these are hard problems, and there's a finite amount of engineering people who can tackle these things. So unless you have a for-profit company like Tenderly, which has to use closed source to...
Also, that's the job of the company and the team, yes.
Yeah. So it's a very hard line to thread. I know that I'm not the founder to run an open source company because, like all of you that raise hands wouldn't have raised hands if we tried to do it in an open source way. And we're going to see how it plays out. I honestly hope, and we're really trying hard to work into a future that we don't depend on the developer tooling piece as a company at all, so we can just open source it, because like the Ethereum ecosystem would probably thrive more. But if we do it now, or at least if we do it in a dumb way that we would probably do it, to be completely honest, we would not have Tenderly, but you would be sitting here with another Eastern European founder saying, so we had Tenderly, now we had you. Do you think we're for the better?
It could be Americans too, I don't know.
It could be, yeah.
There's been a lot of experimentation on the VM space the last couple of years. EVM was kind of the only thing that was out there for a few years. Now we have 20 different flavors of it. How has that kind of changed your thinking on not just your own product, but like just overall, like what do you think is good or bad about these people trying different VMs?
I think experimentation is good. I'm not one of those that thinks that the Ethereum mainnet is moving too slow. So I think that we're moving.
For just Solidity, like the VM or?
VM, Solidity, okay. So all of the stuff, like something not going down for 10 years is amazing. Like people are flexing for Erlang, for example. Ericsson always flexed that Erlang had 9 nines of availability, but then it's like a few asterisk points. Ethereum actually has that particular thing, and I think it's amazing, and I think we should never sacrifice that for speed. I think it's good that we have L2s that can experiment. My pet peeve is that EVM compatible usually doesn't mean EVM compatible, so then we had EVM.
So I guess tell people more on what the difference is and the nuance.
So if you're an RPC provider, for example, you just stand up nodes. I mean, it's not just, it's actually an extremely hard business to run operationally and from a DevOps perspective as well, but there's no custom work that you need to do for the virtual machine itself. Now, when somebody does even something simple like writing a precompile, that's not EVM compatible anymore. It might be EVM compatible from a perspective of Solidity, but from a perspective of any, like us specifically, it's not. Because for Tenderly to do a simulation for you, where, by the way, most of the DAOs in this room depend on that if they're going to move millions of funds, if we are not 100% compatible with those changes, we're actually going to surface the wrong thing in the governance proposal, and then somebody fat fingers like $50 million. I don't think people
hypothetically
understand it. Hypothetically, yeah. No, this actually never happened, just to be specific. And by the way, this is why the sequencers should protect you. But anyway, going back to this, so then everybody said we're EVM compatible, which actually wasn't, it was true, but it stopped being true very quickly. And then we added the term EVM equivalent, which was true for 4.5 months. And then it also stopped being true at a certain point.
So what's the difference between equivalent and compatible?
I have no idea, to be honest. At this point, it's both are not EVM, basically. I think teams like Arbitrum did a very good job of like doing the EVM plus, where the Stylus. So Stylus basically gives you a way to run WebAssembly on Arbitrum Orbit chains. I think that was good because like it's a virtual machine on the side, so we could actually ship support very quickly because it's a thing on the side that we can choose to ignore. We didn't, but it made prioritizing as a infrastructure and tooling provider, it made it easier. And then for RISC-V, for example, I also hope if we do end up shipping it, which I'm not sure if I actually want to happen, but if we do end up shipping it, that we're not doing the replacement, but the thing that Tomasz said, basically, of more side-by-side virtual machines, and then you pick your flavor.
Do you have any general thoughts on what specifically can be done better in Solidity? Like as the language spec itself? Or I guess maybe let me ask it this way. What have been the most common complaints that you get from customers?
Contract verifications, which is very weird. So it's a core part of our work. I don't know, Igor, if your stomach also cramped when I said contract verification. And there's this huge push by the Verifier Alliance as well. There was Sourcify as well. And I still don't, for the life of me, understand how it is such a hard problem because it's moving JSON from one point to another point, but it's still hard, like when you abstract it to its core. I think that's the biggest problem right now when you look at what people care about. And it's a very dumb thing to care, not dumb thing to care about, it's a dumb thing for it to be a problem, but it is a problem.
So break that down for me. Why is that important? And also, I guess, what particular piece is important? The fact that you just want to be able to say that this contract source code is here and it's verified and just the check mark that matters, or do you have additional benefits from having that information accessible? I
think there's two benefits. One is okay, I'm actually interacting with this thing and I know what this thing does, which most people don't check, but then you have tools like, I don't know, our transaction scanning and some other providers which actually use that to make that informed choice for you. But so one is the verifiability of the thing, like when I'm using Uniswap, that I'm interacting with Uniswap contracts. That's one piece. But the second piece is, let's go back to the I'm writing into your own database table. When I'm integrating with Stripe, I have their documentation and I don't particularly care what happens in the background, and then I get an error message. In Solidity, I integrate with, let's say I'm writing a Uniswap hook or whatever, and it blows up. I need to look at other people's code, which is also a very strange thing for people when they come into our space. And suddenly I need that source, and contract verification becomes important. It would be similar that when you integrate every possible thing, like ChatGPT, something doesn't cough up. Normally here, you would like prompt and try to debug it by interacting with it. Here, the analogy would be like going into the model and seeing what's happening.
Nope, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe I guess to kind of wrap things up, I'd be kind of curious to hear what advice you have for anywhere from engineers to founders that are kind of starting to build more complex code on chain. What are kind of some of the lessons you've learned over the years that you think most people end up sort of realizing too late, or realizing that once they know this is a problem, it's too much time to correct? What can we kind of get ahead of as we're building more complex code?
Do most stuff off-chain. I honestly think, I mean, I made that joke last time, my toxic trait 2 years ago was drinking 2 beers and going around the conference asking people what they do and then explaining how it can be done with MySQL. I mean, this is semi-true, but basically, blockchain should be used for verification much more than for execution. That's why I also don't think the high TPS stuff makes sense. And we are moving, by the way, in that direction with all of the zero-knowledge stuff. I mean, that's literally that particular thing. But like, I don't need a to-do app on chain. I don't need these things on chain.
In a way, I agree, but that's not where people are trending. So what's a good way to think about balance, or just even being more mindful of, is there a good framework that helps you say do this or that when faced with this particular type of problem, or just blanket, put data somewhere else, only put proofs on chain?
I think I'm not the correct person to answer that question.
This is like, while I agree, with gas limit increases, with just more DA kind of being the norm, that's not where people will naturally trend towards, because if anything, we're giving them more reasons to not do that, and we're making it even simpler. So how do you kind of still think about what to do when everything's going to 10x in capacity?
I think it also depends in which reality we're going to live in. If we keep the same amount of developers but increase TPS, then the incentives are going to be as such for us to do as many things on chain as possible. If we grow as an ecosystem, which I would love for that reality to exist, the 1000x more TPS isn't going to matter. Like, for the sake of, like, you as a developer now are going to have literally the same experience as a developer like in 5 years at 1000x. If we onboard enough developers to read global and everything else. If we don't, then yes, we can do every button click in a video game as a transaction. Sure, I really don't want to live in that particular world, unless Tenderly like charges for each one of those transactions, which it unfortunately won't happen.
It's a good world.
Or the second one is we actually use off-chain compute for what it makes sense. Like and by the way, when I say off-chain compute, it's like TEs, it's like VRF, ZK proofs, and like all of these things. Do it off-chain and then post stuff on-chain, and that's it. Because we don't need a history of everything that happened. We just need to know if something happened, if that makes sense.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for this amazing chat, and please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you so much.